Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sara Rosette.
And I'm Jami Albright. And this week on the show, we have
Zoe York.
Yes, we do. Zoe's one of the smartest people I know. And especially when it comes to indie publishing, that she really knows her stuff. And she has a new book called Romancing Your Goals. And we had her on to chat about it.
Yes. So we talked about goals, but lots of other stuff too. She has a secret pen name, and we talked about why she kept it secret and how that's going. And we also talked about TikTok a lot, and she's really good at like planning and strategizing to figure out how to take your career kind of to the next level. And we talked about it, Series 2.0, and it was really good. Lots of good stuff in this interview.
And iterating your goals to get to that next level, which I found really interesting.
Yeah.
So what's been going on with you this week?
Well, this week I have actually been doing some writing. I'm doing some just kind of cleanup admin stuff that just has to be done. I've had a couple of events online with writers groups, and that's been fun. Sisters in Crime event that I did.
Oh, fun.
And there was a librarian on the panel and a book reviewer on the panel, and that was fun. And it was interesting to hear their perspective.
Right.
And it was interesting because the librarian said they are very interested. He said most librarians are very interested in programs. And if you're willing to come in and do an event, most of the time, he said librarians are going to be very interested in that. And maybe that might be a better way to approach libraries than, hey, will you buy my book? You offer to host a program, and not necessarily about writing, but maybe about something related. Like if you have, like for me, I could do something about historical mystery or historical time period. You know, like you can find some other thing to draw people in besides this is how you write a book.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting. That's very interesting. Well,
what about you? What have you been doing?
Well, people can't see, but I have a brace on my thumb. When I was in Italy, I fell because, I'm old. It was so embarrassing. And in the middle of Florence, my suitcase got hung up on the curb and then swung around in front of me and tripped me. And it was, anyway. So I thought I had just sprained it or something, but it wasn't getting better. And I went to the doctor and I've torn a ligament. So I've got this brace, and it makes writing really hard. I have to pick a little bit, but I've been trying to do that. And then doing some admin stuff, looking at ads, and then last night I got to go see a sneak peek of Lost City, the Sandra Bullock, Channing Tatum rom-com. Y'all, it's so funny. It's funny, it's silly, but it's got just the right amount of silliness. And it's just I just thought it was well done. I mean, as a romance author, she's a romance author in the movie, and I just loved it. And the people in the theater loved it. We all laughed at the right places. And so,
that's always good.
Yeah, it was really good. So,
I saw the preview for that. And I thought for just a second when it started, I thought they're remaking Romancing the Stone, because you remember how it starts out. She's the writer and everything. And I was like, that I would be up for that. I would be up for a remake of Romancing the Stone, but I'm also up for something new that's not derivative from like an 80s movie that's been remade.
Right. So. I know, and that's the truth. Well, I mean, it is in the jungle, but that's kind of where it starts and stops as far as similarities. It really is very funny, very cute. Channing Tatum was hilarious. I always think Sandra Bullock's funny, and then Brad Pitt is in it. He is equally funny, but he's kind of in and out of it. It's mostly Channing Tatum and Sandra Bullock. And then Daniel Radcliffe is in it too. And he was the villain. And really funny in that too. So
okay, well, good. All right. Well, I have my entertainment set for this weekend then.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we should probably get on with the interview with Zoe because it's super good and you guys are going to love it.
Yes. All right. So here's Zoe. Okay. Well, we are really excited to welcome back Zoe York to the podcast this week. Hi, Zoe. How are you?
Hi. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, we're so glad you're here. We're just so glad. We were just talking. Zoe's just one of the smartest people I know. Excuse me. And I'm always happy to hear her talk and explain stuff. And so I'm excited.
Yeah. So let me read her bio and we'll get started. Zoe York is a 13-time USA Today bestselling author of contemporary romance, often with military heroes, and always with scorching heat between the pages. Between her two pen names, she also writes erotic romance as Ainsley Booth. She has published more than 50 books since her debut in 2013, What Once Was Perfect. So, yeah. So we are really excited to talk to you today.
Tell us what's happened since you were on the podcast last year, because you were on in January last year.
I mean,
January 2021.
It feels like more than a year, doesn't it? I thought it was time is such a funny thing at the moment. Well, since I was on last, I've published another nonfiction book, which I think for now will be my last nonfiction book. Okay. That was a really fun project, but there's always a trade-off of what you're writing, and I'm excited to get back to writing more fiction. I published a third nonfiction book. I started a secret pen name. So my bio, I only named 2 pen names, but I now have a third pen name, which is actually my 5th pen name, and we can talk about that. I have 2 that are like dormant. And I've written more books. That's what I've been doing. I mean, I think like a lot of people, I've just kind of been hunkering down and trying to keep up my, productivity the best I can.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. Go ahead, Sara.
I was going to say, well, let's talk about the secret pen name and kind of the story behind that. Not revealing the pen name, but like why you started another pen name and how that's going and how you're balancing it all.
So this came up last spring, so not long after I was on the podcast last. I have been in a real rut with my second pen name, with Ainsley. Before the pandemic started, I came up with a new series idea that just it didn't quite click. It didn't click for me. It didn't click for the readers. I think that that's something which a lot of writers have experienced. It's a very frustrating experience when what you envision in your head is not what manifests on the page.
Yeah.
And I have this exercise that I do in workshops with readers, which is like, take a look at your catalog, write down all the books that you have written on a single piece of paper and try to organize them, figure out where they're connected, where they're not connected, how you would group them. If you could rebrand similar books together, how would you do that? I call it a catalog assessment. And I did a catalog assessment on myself, on my alter ego, Ainsley Booth. And I realized that I didn't have a single Series 2.0, which is a thing that I talk about, the thing that really elevated my career as Zoe York. I do not have as Ainsley Booth. And of course, it's not just like, you can't just snap your fingers and be like, okay, brain, get a new idea. Let's hop to it. It takes some time to percolate. So I have spent the last year putting Ainsley in a kind of a form of hiatus, a stasis, like go into your thinking tube and come out with a better idea. And something that I realized as soon as I made that decision was that I missed her. I missed having that different output for my ideas. At many times over the course of my career, I've been writing genre fiction since 2011, published since 2013. My best work as Zoe York has been when I'm also very, in a productive way, producing stuff as Ainsley Booth. And I have struggled the most as Zoe when I'm only Zoe. And my work gets a little bit weird, a little bit more erotic than I kind of want Zoe to be. There's just, Ainsley was a pressure valve. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. It's only something that I've realized in the last year. And only when I consciously put her on hiatus And of course, she comes loaded with reader expectations. There's this one very popular series that remains unfinished. Readers only want that book. Mm-hmm. So I can't just be like, well, here's something new. I mean, I tried that and it didn't work. So what else can I do? And I was really captivated by these kind of cracktastic short Insta love stories that are really popular in Kindle Unlimited. Mm-hmm. I was reading a lot of them. They were really nice palate cleansers in between kind of bigger books. Mm-hmm. And I got an idea to write one of those. And I mean, they're not new, right? Like writing short, smutty stuff in Kindle Unlimited is not a new idea. No. But at no point prior to this past year did I have an idea for that. Mm-hmm. So when this idea came to me, I thought, oh, that could be my new pressure valve. You know, that could be my new temporary Ainsley. Ainsley's not going away forever, but just this could be a thing that I do. And I wrote the first book really quickly. And it was exactly the same. It gave Zoe the same boost that Ainsley did. So that's how the pen name came to be.
That's awesome.
And once I wrote that first story, then it was like, I think I have a thing here. I think I have a brand here. How do I want to do it? Do I want her to be an open secret the same way Ainsley is? Mm-hmm. And I decided not. I decided that she would be a closed secret, that she would just be her own thing separate from Zoe and Ainsley. And it's been a lot of fun.
That's great. And how long are they? You said
they vary in length a little bit because sometimes, so one of the things that is quite popular are doing like collaborations where you write one book in a series where other people write the other books. Yeah. And sometimes those collaborations come with length requirements. So I've written a couple of those at varying lengths, like 15,000 words, 18,000 words. But the ones that I'm writing that I'm solely publishing are 30,000 words. That's kind of, I have like a whole bunch of reasons why. That's what I prefer as a reader. I like the slightly longer, the really satisfying, like it's an Insta love, it's short. But like when other books would end at like the 20,000 word mark, we get a couple more scenes. That was kind of my goal, to kind of over deliver.
That's good. No, I have no doubt that you did it for a reason, because you always have a reason. And I think that's awesome. That's fantastic though. So when you say a series 2.0, what exactly are you talking about for our listeners?
Yeah. So series 2.0 is really consciously taking an idea that you liked and readers liked and doing it again. So sometimes it means expanding a series. Sometimes it means taking the concept of a series, but changing the premise to be tighter to a genre. Sometimes it's set in the same universe. Often it's set in the same universe, but not always. The first time I became aware of this phenomenon in publishing was when I read the Virgin River series by Robin Carr. And I don't know how many books in, and she mentions a town called Gold Valley. And I was like, that it comes up enough in this one book that I'm like, I think that's probably a book. You know, like when an author first name, last name's a character, and you're like, they have a book. This town was like first name, last name. Yeah. Like I was like, this town has books. Yeah. And I went and looked them up. Sure enough, she published a trilogy set in Gold Valley, which is in the same Humboldt County area of Northern California, with the characters that are mentioned in Virgin River. Like there's a doctor over there. And it was only a trilogy. And, you know, I don't know anything. I don't know Robin Carr personally. I did meet her once at a conference and then burst into tears. I'm a super fan. So I'm just guessing here. But I think what happened was she wrote that trilogy for Harlequin and it did okay. It didn't do anything special. And so that was the end of that. And they said, give us something different. And instead of completely reinventing the wheel, she went, but I love writing about Humboldt County. I love that setting. So let's just like go over the hill away from Gold Valley. And what's up this mountain? there's a tiny town there called Virgin River. And instead of a male doctor being the center of the story, it's going to be a midwife, a woman who comes from the city and meets a man, and he's going to be absolutely perfect. And, let's make him a former Marine. And instead of being another trilogy for Harlequin, that turned into a 20-book series that is now a Netflix show.
Yeah.
So it's exactly the same. The books are the same, but they're tweaked. They're tighter. The hero is elevated to, the military protagonist that readers love. Instead of being a doctor, the midwife, I don't know, like who knows what tweaks made it so that it clicked, but it's the same premise redone over and over again and so some people, I saw Alana Johnson, who is the really open and sharing author. She recently talked about this in her own Facebook group that she has for authors. She talked about how it was her like 8th or 9th series that suddenly something clicked. So like, I don't want to be like, if you have a series and you really like the idea, if you do that same series concept again, it'll click on the second take. It might take multiple takes, but it's that idea of not pivoting away from an idea, but taking the idea, pivoting only a little tiny bit and refining the premise. And if you refine the premise and then you can test in the market. So if you pivot to a whole new, different idea, what you are essentially doing over and over and over again is series 1.0, right? A trial balloon, a test into the market. And the data is always going to be like first round data. Right. If you do a series 2.0 and test that in the market, then you're going to have more data that you can layer on top of the first set of data. And that will tell you whether or not you're heading in the right direction, which pieces are resonating and which pieces are not. There's nothing about that is a very, it's not a quick fix to anything. No. It's kind of like a long-term strategy that gets you pointed in the direction of where you want to go.
Yeah. That's great. And that's really great. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're not necessarily saying that the characters have to be overlapping from one series to the other, that you just take that kind of nugget of idea, the concept, and use it and kind of boil it down, change it some way. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you have characters that lend themselves, like, for example, the doctor in Gold Valley makes an appearance in Virgin River, that's lovely fan service, but it's certainly not necessary. And the one caution I would give, I think in a YouTube video, I make a point to say Series 2.0 is not a sequel. You are not taking the same cast and just carrying them forward into more books, because that makes what you are thinking is Series 2.0 inaccessible to new readers. The Series 2.0, the first book in Series 2.0 needs to be a catalog entry point. So while carrying some cast forward can be lovely fan service, and you want that fan service to your existing readers, the goal of Series 2.0 is that book one finds you new readers, because the idea itself is solid. And so you're going to have a new book one. You're starting over again, just the same idea.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great. I know our listeners will really appreciate you explaining that, because I did. So you have a series of books that are for authors. So why write this? Why write nonfiction for authors when you clearly have your hands full? Because you also have two children. Is that correct?
2 children. Yeah, two boys.
Two boys on top of that.
A teenager and a preteen.
Oh, good gosh.
No, they are great. They are super supportive. Awesome. They're at this sweet age where they're like, Mom's work is important. Let's let her work. That probably won't last for long, but it's good. In part because I like to talk about publishing, but I don't want to run a course, or I'm not great at responding to emails or DMs. I mean, there's a flood of them sometimes not, like sometimes it's crickets. But it always comes in waves. Anytime if I go on a podcast, then people will message me afterwards. And it's easier to say, here's a book that I wrote, rather than answering questions individually. So the first book, actually, the content came from a course I tried to run once, and before I realized I mean, hat is off to anyone who runs a course.
Yeah.
I do not have I don't have the energy for that. I don't have the patience for that. I'm deeply impressed. My relationship to courses going forward is solely as someone who takes them, not someone who teaches them.
Yes.
And so that content was actually written back in 2016. And then in 2019, I pulled it out of the trunk and I put it into Vellum, which is, book formatting software. And I was shocked to realize I had 100-page book from the course material. Yeah. So the first book was written years ago. And then the second book was written mostly, it was a compilation of a couple of different RWA presentations that I gave, a workshop series that I wrote for in-person presentations. Like I had notes for that. And then some tweet threads and some blog posts, and that all pulled together to be like, let's add to the first book. So the third book, the one that I just released, which is called Romance Your Goals, that's the first book that I actually completely wrote from scratch as a nonfiction book, which was much harder than I thought. So I will definitely say that, I wrote the first two almost by accident. And it's much harder to write nonfiction than I think. So that's why I say that it's also my last nonfiction book.
Because it's hard. Yeah.
It's hard. It is. It's hard to pick one topic, keep it focused, and most importantly, figure out how to make content that is going to stay evergreen enough to be worthy of being on a shelf, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to if we're on a podcast, these, what I say now is clearly time-stamped. In a book, it's not that clear.
Yeah. So let's give the names of the books. So the first one was Romance Your Brand, right? And then the next one was Romance Your Plan. Is that right?
Okay. Plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
the third one is Romance Your Goals.
Yeah. So do you think fiction authors, it's a good thing to try and do nonfiction at the same time? Would you recommend that?
I would. I think for one thing, sales on nonfiction books are never sexy. It's rare that a nonfiction book is going to, for example, spike into the Amazon top 100 or anything like that.
Right.
But they're nice and steady. There is always a hungry audience for writing advice. And my favorite type of nonfiction book, I think there's a sweet spot at books that are about 100 to 150 pages, somewhere between 20 and 30,000 words, that are focused on one bit of writing advice, one takeaway. I have some big writing advice books, and they're overwhelming. I often read them in chapter chunks. The paperback is hard to shove in a purse. So I really like little books. They're light and easy to hold in my hand. They are focused. So if I want to know about, for me, for example, I'm talking to writers about writing, not writing craft, but more business craft. If you want to know just about marketing, then you can read Romance Your Plan, and it's really focused to that. It's kind of built on a foundation of my philosophy around book marketing first, and then there's some a couple of clear active takeaways. That was how I constructed the book. And I think that a lot of people don't realize how short they are, actually. I just said they are really hard to write, but they are, but only in that refinement, only in the revision of it. They don't take the same length of time to take as a full-length novel, for example. And they're also something that you can work on slowly. And then if there is an opportunity for you to give a workshop at a conference or go on a podcast, or you're just going to have a lull in between fiction releases, it's a big conversation. It's a never-ending conversation. It is an evergreen market. So anybody if you have a workshop that you have previously done that you're like, hey, I wonder if I could turn that into a nonfiction book. I think that is a genius idea. I think more people should do it. It's a little another leg on your income stool. That's another way to think about it.
Yeah. Another stream of income. Yeah.
I think for me, it would be so hard to narrow down because I just, I want everybody to know everything. And then, it's like, you gotta,
But then that means you could have a series of nonfiction books.
I guess that's true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I didn't understand with nonfiction, when I wrote I did How to Outline a Cozy Mystery. And I thought, oh, this is way too short. Because in my brain, I wanted, I thought that it had to be like a tome, a reference tome. And it wasn't long enough. I was like, it's not long enough. And so when I published it as a workbook. And looking back now, it could have been, because I included white space for people to put, their thoughts and ideas, but it could have just been a book. It didn't have to be a workbook. Mm-hmm. And so, that was a mistake I made with nonfiction. So they don't have to be, 300 pages.
They do not. Yeah. One of my favorite writing craft books is a book called Writing from the Middle by James Scott Bell.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only 100 pages, I think.
Oh, wow.
In paperback. It's a little book and it is so accessible. And so many writing books are not accessible. There's too much. Where do I get started?
Yeah. Well, a lot of them are long and it's like they tell you what they're going to tell you. They tell you about what they're going to tell you. And, chapter 15, we finally get to the meat of it, So I appreciate shorter ones.
Another really good short one is Romancing the Beat by Gwen.
Yes.
And so useful.
Useful. Yes.
There's nothing extraneous in that book at all. It's a wonderful resource.
Well, and then on top of like doing what she said, she then gives you an example of a novella that she wrote at the end of that. But I mean, it's like you not only get the practical advice, you get an example. And I just I think that's so great. I also Build a Book by Erica Kelly. It's really tiny, y'all can see. But it's great because it's like, this is what you do at the midpoint. This is the conflict. This is, and it's really useful. So I think you're right. I think little books that get right to the point are very, very useful when it comes to fiction.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Romance Your Goals. Let's get more specific. So when you were on the podcast last time, we did talk about goal setting, but so tell us, we want to go more in depth this time. So tell us, about the book and kind of why you wrote this book now for authors.
Yeah. So I think it was on the podcast last time after I gave a presentation at RAM about with the same title, Romance Your Goals and Goal Setting. And so this book is really an expansion on that. I took the framework of what I talked about at RAM. And one of the things about that presentation was, and I think that your listeners are well familiar, RAM, Romance Author Mastermind, is like a next level conference for people who are into their career as romance authors. But the market for the nonfiction writing books is often people who are starting out. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I wanted to do in the book was just acknowledge that a lot of goal setting advice for authors skips those early stages of, but like, how do you get started? Mm-hmm. What if you don't have any money? I have a short chapter in the book on the hustle and the baby steps that are sometimes required before you can even do things like invest in better covers and better editing, that sort of thing.
Yep.
So, what are those initial steps? And then also just how often I revise my plan. So the other thing that I added to the book were some case studies. Well, one of the case studies is in fact that catalog assessment that I talked about, my realization that Ainsley didn't have a series 2.0, that so much of goal setting is not just about picking what you want to do and aiming in that direction, but taking stock of what have you actually done? Where are you actually standing? Because sometimes it's not what you think. That was a huge realization for me, and one that came after we talked last time.
That's great. What tools do you use for goal setting?
So I'm a big fan of Sarah Cannon's HB90 quarterly planning system.
Yep.
Huge fan. I've been doing that now for 6 quarters. I started it, I heard about it at RAM, and then that was the first one that I took. So it would have been January, like Q1 2021 was the first time I took HB90. And that has remained useful. And I have ADHD. Sticking with the system is not my forte. So the fact that I've stuck with that for 6 quarters is remarkable. I really love that she uses some universal tools like an Eisenhower matrix, but makes it specific to writing.
Right.
Chunking up your to-do list. So in HB90, she guides you through breaking down your to-do list into need to do, should do, and want to do. The should do's, of course, anything that's on your, I feel like I should do this. Those are the external voices that we are so susceptible to, other people's goals and priorities slipping onto our to-do list. I need that reminder quarterly. So that is definitely one of the tools that I use. And the long-term vision. So the question that I ask, and it's not just in Romance Your Goals. I also ask this question. I talk about it in Romance Your Brand as well. But that question of 5 years from now, what do I want to have written? What do I want to be known for? And if for some people, that is a very hard question to answer, first of all. So just spending some time with, when you ask yourself that question, if you cannot answer it yet, why not? Are there those external voices or internal negative self-talk telling you that you're not worthy of whatever that secret goal is, right? Like sometimes we can feel it inside, and it's this like nervous excitement. There's this like tremor of there's a thing that I want, but I do not dare say it out loud.
Yes.
So really taking the time and finding some peace and some stillness to actually say it out loud or even write it down. And then once you have that answer, 5 years from now, what do I want to have written? What do I want to be known for? Then taking stock of, is what I am doing right now pointing in that direction? So it's kind of a 2-part thing. And Sara does this in HB90. She has you kind of do a vision board. And I am more of a word person than an aesthetic person, but I really enjoyed the vision board exercise. So you do that, kind of vision board, and then figure out for the next quarter, what gets you moving in the direction of that vision board. And her focus is on the quarter. For me, and in Romance Your Plan, I talk about it as a year. So in Romance Your Brand and Romance Your Goals, I talk about that 5-year question. And then in Romance Your Plan, I talk about how to break that up or like spend the next year working in that direction in a sustainable way. So once we know where we want to go and we have figured out which parts of what we're currently working on point in that direction or not, then there can be an instinct to go, right, let's fix everything, which of course that's a recipe for burnout, right?
Right.
So we're not going to do it all in the next month, but we could do a lot of that work in the next year. One of the things about goals is that if you are, and this comes from like corporate speak, but if you are picking a big enough and hairy enough goal, that it should not be attainable within a year. If you are constantly picking goals that are attainable within a quarter or a year, then you might need to go back to that stillness and figure out, what is that, like what's underneath those, because those goals are really like always achievable goals are not like the big hairy goal. They're they're what we grab onto because we can do them. But underneath that, there is often something that's really scary. And if we are honest about what that is, then suddenly we might start reaching for like much bigger and better things than what we're currently achieving, which sounds a little, that when I say that, it sounds a little woo woo, but I really do think that we often hamper ourselves by telling ourselves that we should be happy enough with what we have, or that what we are achieving is good enough. And it certainly maybe like there are times in our lives where stability is more important than growth. But if we are constantly settling for nothing but stability, then we never see growth. And when we're talking about business, businesses do need to see growth from time to time in order to really flourish.
Right. There's that fine line though, too, between stability and growth, like, being grateful and happy with where you're at, but then also, and it's easy to slip from one side to the other where you're, neurotic because you're trying to grow so much, and then, or you're, depressed because you're just where you're at. I mean, it's kind of this weird line. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think that the long-term goals need to be balanced with, like short-term gratefulness and appreciation for what you've achieved. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. That's great.
Well, say you got your long-term plan and you've made a plan, you got your long-term goal and you made a plan to get to this certain thing, but then maybe you talked about changing your goal. You said you change your goals a lot. So how do you know when it's time to maybe readjust or change? Do you have any signs or anything?
Yeah. So I think that for me, it is, it's a gut feel thing. Anytime there's a major shift external to yourself, hey, big world event, global pandemic, that shifted a lot of people's goals in a significant way. My goals used to be travel oriented. That had to stop. Other people, it's more about like milestones. Goals are, for example, people who have young kids at home, right? Right now, stability might be more important for you than growth. But when your kids leave home and they go to college and you suddenly have so much more time on your hands, at that point, that's an obvious moment to take stock and reconsider your goals and start to prioritize your business again. It's, perfectly reasonable to only be able to be a writer part-time. There are lots of people who are part-time writers for their entire lives. There's nothing wrong with that. But the moment when we shift how much time we have for this career, is often that's the moment to take stock again and reassess your goals. Sometimes it can also be about a shift in the market. So we talked a little bit about my alter ego. The last time, I don't know, 2016 or 2017, when I saw people writing short Insta-love books taking off, just didn't trigger any excitement in me. Like I enjoyed reading them, but like they didn't spark any ideas for my own. And then the market shifted. For those who read romance, there's always like this, like what's super hot right now, right? Like it was Shifters, and then it was like Step Brothers, and now it's Reverse Harem or whatever. There's, you know what? I think I mentioned this last time. Actually, there's a sports ball reference that I can't remember. The guy who owns a Dallas sports team, Mark Cuban says, know when you're riding a bull market. That one of his top 3 pieces of business advice is know when you're riding a bull market. And sometimes we will see a market shift swing into view that aligns with a goal that we didn't know that we had, right? So a market, like, let's say you're writing small town romance and suddenly Shifters become so popular and you're like, oh, I have 2 Shifter books in the trunk, and you get really excited about that, right? So market shifts can definitely be a moment when you're like, hang on a second, we're going to reassess all of our goals. We're going to like, how can I fit this in? Anytime you have that like swell of excitement, but it's important to differentiate between grabbing the bull by the horns, so to speak, and riding a bull market, and making the mistake of thinking, oh, this bull market could be a part of a 5-year plan, because they never last 5 years, right? So it's important that that we don't lose sight of the 5-year plan that we had before this excitement happened, and making sure that, like, absolutely, you know, be nimble and shift on the spot, but don't get carried away either.
Right. That's great. That's really great, because I mean, there are things that have changed just in the last year, year and a half with TikTok, you know.
Yeah.
It's really changed readers' habits in a lot of way. And I'm not part of that group that is getting all the attention, because while my books have sex on the page, they're not those super, super steamy books, and they're not dark, which they really love on TikTok.
They do. Although I think also that TikTok is a great example of a market force that is constantly shifting. Like, absolutely every single week, what somebody says to be true about TikTok, I'm like, changes. I mean, that's true right now, but it might change. One of the, and this is a bit of an aside, one of the wildest things that I have observed about TikTok is how it feels like 2013 all over again, in a good way, in a very good way. But you remember back in 2013 on Facebook, there would be these groups. One was called What to Read After 50 Shades of Grey, and it had like 50,000 members. And if you posted in that group about your romance book with the right hook, it soared up the charts, right? TikTok is having the same energy, and it's revealing a bunch of interesting things, I think, kind of accidentally. One of which is, I really think that Facebook, well, we already knew this, right? We knew that Facebook, that the numbers that we would see, for example, like on video plays, right? You could post a Facebook video to your page and you could get a couple thousand views on it. And it would not move the needle at all. And there were all sorts of rumors that Facebook's data can't be trusted, and who knows. But it felt so stagnant. Like, I'm doing all this social media stuff and it's not working. So then, you know, we all started to say, well, social media doesn't really sell books.
Right.
Well, TikTok has definitely proved that to not be true.
Exactly.
But how it's selling books is not, it's not necessarily like the best videos or even the type of book. It is about tapping into an underserved market there are so many people on TikTok who do not yet read books in digital form.
I know.
So my alter ego, which, like, from, you know, how I talked about it already in this podcast, is Kindle Unlimited, Insta Love, short, smutty reads, right? For us, for everybody inside the publishing space, that's a digital product, right? I have multiple people commenting, I've ordered the book, it'll be here on Friday. Oh, you tease, I can't read it until it arrives on Friday. Oh, I can't read. I'm so happy that I found you. I can't wait to start reading this book when the paperback arrives. And I'm like, it's right there on your phone. Like the second.
Right.
Which is
it's so easy.
Yeah, it would be so easy, but they're not there yet, which is fine. And like, I'm not talking about, like, I'm not selling like 100 paperbacks a day, but it is a visible difference.
Mine too.
It's remarkable. And
it's remarkable.
Like, so we are going to see that market mature in the same way that the Facebook market matured from 2012 through to 2015. I don't know whether it's going to take the same duration of time. It might be 6 months instead of 3 years.
Right.
But, you know, at some point in the not too distant future, TikTok will drive ebook sales even more than it is now. Like that's only going to grow as those paperback readers realize that for the price of one paperback, or they could get 4 ebooks, right? Like that's, you know, we're going to just see that they are going to be reading more books, and then it's going to, and then that market's going to mature. And so again, knowing you're riding a bull market, TikTok cannot be, you can't at this moment pivot and put all your eggs in the TikTok basket.
No.
Well, I mean, you can, but it's risky, right? You still need to have that like solid 5-year plan 5 years from now, what do you want to have written?
Right.
Don't let the excitement of TikTok drive you off course from that. Right.
Right. Yeah. Right.
That's more for myself than
I know. Me too. Thank you for saying that.
I don't know who needs to hear this today, but
it is exciting because, I mean, I have I have one video that, my first one has over 200,000 views, but it was a book view, but it's just different. It was a duet to someone else who had a large following. So that's weird. But I have a few, that have over 10,000 views. I'm almost at 10,000 followers. But if I get a video that has even 1,000 views, I'll see an increase in especially paperback sales, but I will see a rank improvement. Yeah. And it's just amazing. It's just so funny, but you have to be persistent in that. Yeah. And you have to decide how much time is this worth, because for your 5-year plan, the time you spend on TikTok right now is probably not going to move the needle on that much. This is almost an instant gratification sort of thing. It's fun, but it's an instant gratification. Yeah. Sorry, y'all.
So, quick question about the goals. Are your 5-year goals, are they more to do with the books you will write versus social media type things? Or, I mean, do you kind of separate it mentally like that? Social media.
My very first 5-year goal, the first time that I did this exercise, was after I was laid off. So I had been published for 11 months and my position was eliminated and I was packaged out of my job. And I had this opportunity to try and write full time. So suddenly the goal crystallized. I definitely knew, all right, I have 10 months of severance. I want to, in that time, get myself up to making full-time income. And anybody who's run a small business knows it's not just like replacing your salary at a day job, but you want it kind of another 30% on top of that so that you can save for rainy days. And then there are business expenses and you don't have benefits and stuff like that. So I set a goal for myself of making $10,000 a month. And for a long time, for almost the next 5 years, that remained my long-term goal. So I had a long-term income goal of income stability.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then one of the things that I talk about in Romance Your Goals is that in 2017, so actually it was just 4 years. That was my 5-year goal for 4 years. And then at the end of the 4th year of that plan, my family had a health crisis. My husband is in the military and he was diagnosed with PTSD and everything just stopped. Writing stopped, him working stopped. And my day-to-day became who has a therapy appointment today? Mm-hmm. And that, it's very hard to care about income when you're in that situation.
Sure.
And so since that point, that my income goal or income has stopped being a goal. So there was kind of an interim period there where it was okay, just make enough to cover bills. Mm-hmm. Don't eat into savings became a goal. So how can I start to goose, backlist more? Maximize backlist was a goal for probably about a year. Everything in my business, every business decision I made between basically all of 2018 was, am I maximizing the big question that I asked myself, the kind of, if anyone has ever done a mission vision statement, you could have a kind of a touchstone question that determines am I on the right track or not? Mm-hmm. And so for 2018, my touchstone question was, am I maximizing my backlist? And that got me through without caring about numbers. Because for me, if I set an income goal and I consistently don't meet it, that's demoralizing, right? I don't want goals that are so hard, so lofty that I can't meet them. So I have hard to reach goals, but then I have stepping stone goals and I want to be able to meet those stepping stone goals.
Right.
So now my long-term, so So I went from focusing on long-term goals to focusing on the more of those stepping stone goals of like, am I maximizing my backlist? That is within my control.
Right.
And then in 2020, I shifted again to a longer term goal. So now my longer term goal is about more estate planning. My income stabilized at a place I'm comfortable with. And so now it's more about, okay, like when I retire, I want to have a second property. I want my house and that second property to be paid off. I joke in the book, it's a bit of hyperbole, but my new goal is I want a private island. And which is like, and that comes from RAM, right? That comes from being honest in a safe space where I can talk about income freely. Previously, my goals were about like being securely in that middle class income range or upper middle class income, depending on where you live. But when that was rocked, I realized actually I have loftier ambitions for that are less about month to month income stability and more about how do I shake myself out of plateaus and jump up to the next level. And some of that is so big that it's kind of hard to encapsulate in a 5-year plan. So like the 5-year plan becomes like, let's joke, I want a private island. But it's really a second property. It's about building an estate of its stability, but on like a much larger level.
Right.
So that's how I kind of think about my own personal goals. Someone else might be oriented to number of books that they put out, right? They might find, so if you're stability oriented, you might care about that. The other thing that I talk about in the book is understanding your goal profile. So somebody, for example, who cares deeply about being recognized as an outlier or like a bestseller, but like I don't mean actually a bestseller. I mean like the bestsellers of the bestsellers. There is no point in me kind of detailing my stability, income oriented goals for them and being like, hey, want to try this on? Because it will not have any value to them because all they you know, somebody who wants to be an outlier will keep working on like a day job for a very long time. Will they quietly work on finding the right agent to pitch the right book to the right editor at the right time? And after 20 years, have a book that lives on the New York Times list for 10 months, right? That is a completely different goal profile to what I want. So it's like goals are not universal. They are really unique to kind of where you see yourself and what you want to have written.
Yeah, I think that's helpful to see, kind of to give examples. That's really helpful to say, it could be this, like that.
And in a way, you almost have to put blinders on to set your goals because you can let, which I have before, other people's success. I mean, it can motivate you, but you should not chase it because you're different and your life is different than their life, your experiences and where you're at in your life. And I think I've made that mistake before where, I
have too.
Yeah. I've set my goals based on what everyone else was doing instead of what really I want. And
And often we don't know. When most of our connections are through the internet, we do not ever know just how many different factors there are. We can look at somebody and think, well, they write the same thing that I write. They release the same number of books a year that I write. We seem to have similar readerships. So I should do what they're doing. But at our core, we could want very different things out of this career. They might be doing that as a stepping stone to get somewhere else, whereas this could be my end goal. They could have been doing, for example, no one who is writing Insta-Love should compare what they are doing to what my alter ego is doing, because they don't know that my alter ego is also Zoe York on the back end. Of course, my launch is going to look different. Of course, I'm going to have a slick email game because I've done it before. You know, so many, you don't know what's behind the name.
Right.
And that can be frustrating. But also at some point you might want to benefit from the secrecy of a name too.
Yeah.
So just like always assume that there are more factors you can't see.
Right.
It's that iceberg thing, right?
Right. And one thing just for me is age. You know, I'm 58. Yeah. I don't, you know, comparing myself to someone in their late 30s, early 40s that's not fair, because my goals and their goals are two different things. So just keeping things like that in mind, I think helps.
Totally. I mean, every parent of a young toddler who is like, I can only work 2 hours a day. Oh, honey, like no one's comparing you to anybody.
No. Yeah. That's impressive if you can get 2 hours a day with a toddler.
Very.
Exactly. That's so funny. Well, you're great at out of the box marketing ideas too, Zoe. And you have your Facebook group, and it's Zoe Bub. You did not name that. Someone else named it Zoe Bub. But can you talk about that and maybe some other outside the box ideas that you've had, or you've tried, didn't work kind of thing?
Yeah. So the Zoe Bub is another project that I give in Romance Your Goals as a case study. I think that the most important thing to mention about Zoe Bub, and it's the focus of the case study in the book, is that it started like a lot of things that I do. It started in a really inauspicious way. Numbers were very slow to build for a very long time. We've been doing this free blast since December 2014. And the fact that we've been doing it for so long is why it is so big now. So 4 times a year, I organize this free blast. If anyone is listening, it's like, how do I get in on that? For logistical reasons. It's a private Facebook group. Any romance author is welcome to join, romance or romance adjacent. We also have like cozy mystery authors, for example, who have like romantic elements in their books. Anyone is welcome to join. You just have to know somebody who does it. So pay attention. The website is romancebookworms.com. Pay attention when we do one. And if you recognize one of the authors in the promo, ask them to invite you to the group. Also, anyone is welcome to take the idea and duplicate it. It's not actually an original idea. I think that most of my quote unquote out of the box ideas are just ones that I've seen other people do, and I retain it. We were talking about Clifton Strengths before we started, and I'm number 3 input, number 1 ideation. So I like hoover up all the marketing ideas I see out there, put them into like an idea tumbler, and spit out variations of them. Some of them take off, some of them do not. But the biggest takeaway I have from doing this, which is I used to just call the free blast, and the Facebook group for it was called the Romance Cross Promotion Working Group, which no one could ever find. So then someone started calling it Zoe Bub, and so I renamed the Facebook group to Zoe Bub. But you can't find it as Zoe Bub either because it's hidden, because Facebook will suggest it to random people. And I'm like, no, Facebook, don't suggest it to random people.
Yeah.
So you need an invite to get in, not because I'm trying to be cliquey. There are 1,000 people in the group, and probably 300 or 400 of them participate each time now. The principle is we all have a mailing list. We all have free books. And so every so often, not too often, if we all put those free books on one landing page and share that one landing page to our lists on the same day, we can get collective lift, right? And collective lift is such a valuable promotional tool, and it's free. We now are on, I moved the website to Squarespace hosting. So it's not technically free anymore. I put out a collection plate. I asked people to donate $2 each, and people enjoy it enough that got us enough money to host for 2 years. So like, it's technically, I do ask for a donation every so often, but like a very, very small one. And for a long time, I just hosted it on my own, my shared hosting account. I get a lot out of it. That's why I host it. I think that if you're going to do something like that, like a cross promotional event, and it could be anything, it's a similar concept to like the idea of the book funnel promotions that a lot of people do. If you post something, it should be something that everybody gets value out of, that the participants get value out of, that the people that you're marketing to get real value out of. And if everyone gets value out of it, there will be a natural enthusiasm that propels the event forward and makes you want to do it again. And just like my principle of Series 2.0, the iteration of an event, like I say in the book, this event only had, I think it was 38 authors the first time we did it, which was Boxing Day, 2014. And it only had 38, 40, 45, 50 people all the way through 2015. Maybe we were up to 100 participants in 2016. And it was only in 2017 or 2018 that that the numbers really started to go up in a more than linear way. And then a year ago, 2 years ago, we had a big jump and then another jump. And now it's growing faster. So some of the things that I have done to refine it is, the first 4 years that we did it, it was literally a randomized list of free romance books. No genre categorization, nothing like that. No keywords. And now I break it down by category just because there's so many inside each category that makes sense. But that kind of I guess the big takeaway there is if you have an idea and you do it and it's only okay, do it again.
Yeah.
And then do it again. Stick with it. See it through. If we abandon ideas too soon, then we never see them through to the point of, oh, this is a significant thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Do I have other out of the box ideas? I don't know. That's probably I'm really okay. Here's one that I'm really enjoying on TikTok. So I'm on TikTok, like Jami's on TikTok. I've been on TikTok since the start of the pandemic as Zoe York. I had 2 videos that kind of did really well. Neither were about books. One was about bra sizes, like how to accurately measure your bra size. And the other was about reusing Amazon mailers. So, those white Amazon mailers, you can use nail polish remover to take off the Amazon blue Amazon printing, and then you've got a white mailer. And you can reuse. Anyway, neither of those sold any books, obviously. So I have this TikTok account that has, thousands of subscribers or followers that doesn't really, it's me. It is my brand. It represents my brand. I get engagement, blah, blah, blah. It's not selling any books. So I start to see other people who, not authors, just they are authors, but the accounts don't look like authors. They say things like steamy book talk and hot, spicy reads. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to do one of those about the type of books that my alter ego writes. And long story short, now I have 6 TikTok accounts and they don't take me any more time actually than maintaining one, because I'm not reinventing the wheel each time. It's a refinement of an idea. So I think that my out of the box idea that I would suggest to listeners is watch what other people are doing and do not be afraid to copy. Don't be afraid to copy my idea for the free book blast. Don't be afraid to copy, in your own way. Take it and make it your own, but don't be afraid to copy what you see people doing on TikTok. Don't be afraid to, I don't know, series construction, I think so many people just spend too much time going, I must come up with a unique and original idea. I promise you, I don't do that. I don't ever do that. Everything that I do is to riff off someone else. And the more you riff it, the better it will be. So too often we riff a little bit, try to just make an exact copy, and it comes across as derivative and flat. We don't want to be derivative and flat. We want to take an idea and really riff on it and improve it and make it our own. And that's when, and then someone will be like, I saw you doing this thing. It's amazing. It's so unique. No, borrow.
No.
100%.
That's very true, though.
Yeah.
It's super true. Like I saw somebody on TikTok. She's like, "You may be from the South. If you hear people say something, I can't remember. Yeah. And while I am from Texas, that's not the South." And so I did one that said, "You may be from Texas if you hear someone say that boys is useless. It's tits on a boar hog." But I credited her because that's the idea I saw first, and that video got lots of response and lots of comments about other things people say, or whatever.
Yeah. And I mean, crediting somebody for an idea that sparked something new for you, that's just lovely. That's kindness. Like, definitely. Yeah. Credit wherever possible.
Yeah, exactly. But the whole point being that I wasn't really selling books. I did say, for this and other colorful Texasisms, check out my books, but it wasn't I was just doing something funny. And so I think that taking those things that you see either on TikTok or Instagram or wherever and refining them to you and your personality, that's another thing, is really smart. So this has been great. Thank you for talking to us. We just have loved it. Can you tell people where they can find you and your books?
Yep. So my nonfiction books are at romanceyourbrand.com. My fiction books are at zoeyork.com, AinsleyBooth.com, and secretalterego.com. No kidding.
But you better run out and get that one right now. Yeah. That URL.
And also I'm at Zoe York Writes everywhere except on TikTok. I'm author Zoe York. I actually do have the Zoe York Writes at TikTok, but like I heard a rumor that you should have author in your name instead of Writes. And so I changed it, and then I can't change it back for 30 days. It's a whole thing. But on social media, I am at Zoe York Writes.
Okay, awesome. Well, we will have all those links, and we'll have links to some of the books that we mentioned earlier and the previous podcast you were on, and anything else I can find a link to, we'll throw it in there. And that will be at wishidknownthenpodcast.com, or no, just wishidknownthenpodcast.com. And thanks to Alexa Larberg for editing and producing the podcast, and to Adriel for doing the admin. And we'll see everybody next week. Bye. Everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.